Well, welcome everyone. Today I'm with Father Deiniol, who is a priest here in North Wales. We're in the town of Blaenau Ffestiniog, which is nestled high in the crags of the very mountainous, very hilly area here in North Wales. And Father Deiniol takes care of a parish church here in Blaenau Ffestiniog, as well as churches in Wrexham and in Bangor, these are all parishes here in North Wales. And we're actually in his house. This is the chapel in his house, which was for a while, I believe, the home of the parish here in Blaenau Ffestiniog until they moved into a larger space. And Father Deiniol is a native of Wales, and today we're going to be talking about his life story, how he became an Orthodox Christian, but particularly about the incredibly rich Christian inheritance here in Wales. So, Father Deiniol, thank you very much for coming and for allowing us into your home and speaking with me today.
Father, thank you very much for this invitation. It's a great honor and a blessing to have you here and to be invited to make this interview.
It's a great honor for me as well. So why don't we begin by if you don't mind, by talking about you. How is it that you became an Orthodox Christian? Growing up here in Wales, there's not a lot of presence of Orthodox Christianity here in Wales, here in the 21st century.
When I became Orthodox, there was only one Orthodox church in North Wales, in Cardiff, the Greek church, founded 150 years ago by Greek tradesmen and shipping people. So, and I was brought up in Northeast Wales, so Cardiff was very far away and inaccessible. So yes, there was no opportunity. When I became interested in finding out more about Orthodoxy, there was no possibility of attending an Orthodox church. The nearest one to me was the Greek church in Liverpool, also one of the older Greek churches in Britain, one of the four oldest ones. London, Manchester, Liverpool and Cardiff. But that also was not all that accessible to me as a student. So I was interested in the history of Christianity. I was brought up in a devout, Reformed family with many clergy in the family. And going to church was a regular part of my life. I also was very blessed to have an excellent religious education teacher in secondary school. And he had actually taken a group of students to the Serbian church in Birmingham, which actually worshipped in a space very similar to this, in a house in Birmingham at that time. And I wasn't with that group, but upon their return, they spoke of their visit, and I was already interested in church history. And I wrote to the wonderful priest, the late Father Melangell, and asked if I could attend a service. And I attended a Christmas service there on the Julian calendar in 1967 or 8, and felt immediately at home, having not attended an Orthodox service before. So the time came to leave school and to apply to university, and I looked for theology courses where you could focus on the history of Christianity. And I found such a course in London University in King's College, and there were excellent tutors there, some very distinguished theologians, including, at a certain point, Dr. Philip Sherrard, who became my supervisor at a certain point. So I applied to that course and got onto it. And then I was able to attend Orthodox churches in London. And I did that regularly, and eventually was received into the Russian Orthodox Church in the cathedral in Ennismore Gardens when I was 19 or 20 years of age.
Now, was that when Father, Metropolitan Anthony Bloom was the bishop there?
Yes, he was indeed. And then in subsequent years, we worked together on projects, and he became my mentor, really, and a guide, we can say, and ordained me, professed me a monk. Having done my novitiate with an elderly hermit monk in Wales, the Archimandrite Barnabas, and he died some years ago, and he was based in mid Wales. And then I was professed by Metropolitan Anthony and ordained deacon and priest by him as well.
It's my understanding that Father Barnabas was the first Orthodox priest in Wales in the modern era, the first Welsh Orthodox priest, perhaps, in the modern era.
Certainly, yes.
What can you tell me about some remembrances of him?
He was a very interesting and indeed extraordinary man, brought up in a small Welsh village near Melangell, bilingual like myself, Welsh his first language like mine. And he had been an Anglican priest and had actually lived in a Western monastery too, before engaging with Orthodoxy. And he became Orthodox in France, lived in a monastery belonging to the Kherson diocese, a Russian diocese in France, and after a certain number of years returned, hoping to found a monastic community in the UK. He lived first in one or two places in England, and where he lived, I think Hastings, I think a parish evolved. And then afterwards he was in Devon, and one or two parishes evolved there. And his dream of a monastic community didn't evolve, but many parishes owe their existence to his work, both there in England, and then when he returned to Wales, and he lived in Mid Wales, one or two places in Mid Wales, but basically as a hermit most of the time, faithful hermit monk. So yes, we worked closely together and travelled together to various places, and yes, so he and I became the Welsh-speaking clergy whom people would turn to if they wanted to know something about the Orthodox Church.
Tell me about his personality a little bit.
His personality, well, he was very devout. He was very good at preaching. He was an excellent preacher. His sermons were very fine. He was very faithful to his monastic routine, reciting the divine office daily in full. I mean, all the services may be slightly abbreviated, but all the services, the daily services, and people went there, and people learned about the services, and yes, but he also had a wonderful sense of humor. He was excellent with people. He would, I think, have made an excellent parish priest, and maybe that's how these parishes evolved from his work in various places. But that's not what he felt called to do, and but it happened nevertheless.
Right.
Largely because of his personality.
So tell me a little bit about where we are now. We're in this chapel in your home. What was it like when you began the community here in your town?
So I was ordained in 1979, and my generation of clergy who were ordained by the late Metropolitan Anthony, of blessed memory, my generation, we had to earn our own living. And so I was a teacher in secondary school for many years, most of my teaching, well, all my teaching career. And I was teaching in this area. And the first church we had was in an old, closed Wesleyan Methodist chapel, which had been converted into a church, and I lived in the basement underneath. It was very much a hermit type context, but it was remote and not really a place to which Orthodox people in North Wales would gravitate, because there were some Orthodox people living in North Wales, not many, very few, a few Greek families, three remarkable Greek ladies who had married Welsh soldiers and returned to Wales. They didn't know what to expect, returned to Wales and lived here, brought up their families here. And one or two people, one Russian lady, a Belarusian lady, they lived in what was called the Polish home. It was basically displaced people from the Second World War. And one Romanian lady. I only came across one Romanian lady. But nevertheless, the place where I was situated was not convenient. Blaenau Ffestiniog is very central in North Wales. There are roads gravitating in 4 directions, and thus people can come here from whichever part of North Wales they live. It was also within reach of my paid employment, 20 minutes by car, and property was cheap here. This building was a very run-down building, and where we're sitting now had been the shop.
Okay.
And was very suitable for conversion to an Orthodox church. And so, yes, this is how I moved to live in Blaenau Ffestiniog. Blaenau Ffestiniog is sometimes regarded as the centre of the slate mining industry, which was the main industry in northwest Wales, heavy industry, based in 3 or 4 centres in North Wales. And this particular town employed many thousands of people in the slate mining industry. Unlike the other centres in North Wales, these mines in Blaenau Ffestiniog were underground. In the other places, they were not underground. But here, people were mining for slate. So they worked in extraordinarily difficult and terrible circumstances, really. They worked underground. In winter, they would see daylight only on Saturday afternoons and Sundays, and they typically would go to church 3 times on a Sunday, where they wouldn't see much sunlight either. Anyway, so they worked in these mines, thousands of them. The conditions were very harsh. At an early stage in the development of the industry, they had to supply their own candles to put on their helmets to illuminate the huge caverns from which the slate was mined. It's a subterranean world. There are tunnels connecting these various mines, and the various levels. They go down from here to about sea level.
Oh, goodness.
And across several miles across. So there are levels going down from, this is about 2,000 feet, going down to sea level, and then across equally far. And so this is where the thousands of people worked. It's an amazing history. And they survived, actually, I think we can say this. They survived because they were people of faith. They were, of course, not Orthodox Christians. They'd never heard of Orthodoxy. They would be mainly from the Protestant denominations, Baptist, Methodist, Congregationalists. So in their spare time, by which I mean half an hour's lunch break, in their cabin in the mines, they would have their lunch, a quick lunch, and then they would have discussions, theological, historical, philosophical. They prepared for these discussions, I imagine, pretty well, and they had very high requirements. People were not allowed to use bad language, for example. And yes, and then they would go to church 3 times on a Sunday. They were determined that their children would not work in these circumstances, and they raised money to build the University of Wales, so their descendants would not have to live in those conditions. Well, their descendants, of course, are still in town, but the industry has declined very seriously because of competition from other countries. I was told that the competition is effective because the geology of the rock here, I was once told, is such that the penultimate and ultimate process in slate production can only be done by hand, whereas I think it can be done mechanically in other places where the geology is different. That's how it was explained to me at some point. So the industry was susceptible to competition in the last, let's say, 50 years. So whereas maybe 60 years ago one could hear the miners coming down the hill from the mines like an army walking down the road, in recent years there were just a few people working in each of the mines, and there's hardly any work in the slate mines now, and none actually in the caverns, subterranean caverns. And so this has left the town a post-industrial town, and post-industrial towns have their own challenges, and this one has its own challenges. Unemployment, 0 hours contracts and things like this. And I felt from the outset it was a great privilege to live in such a community, and to live among these people who were either miners or descendants of miners, and who had created. There was nothing here before. There was no town in Blaenau Ffestiniog. There was the old village of Llan Ffestiniog, 3 miles away, but here was just the end of a valley. There was nothing here, basically 1 or 2 farms. And this huge community was created. It was 15,000 people then, I think, down to 5 now, which tells us something, of course. And at one point, 40 places of Christian worship.
Wow.
40 places.
It's hard to believe looking at the town now.
Yes, it is indeed. And looking at the degree of religious attendance now, it is. But that was the situation then. It was sort of central to their life, Christian faith.
You mentioned that they, especially in the old days, that the miners were people of great faith. And but also then that the church attendance throughout the UK is very, very low. And so that leads me to my next thought, which is we're sitting here in this chapel, and among icons of many saints that probably a lot of people watching and listening to this would recognize, there are also saints that are particular to Wales, that lived here in Wales, that this is where their life, their ministry was. And in a sense, as I'm thinking about this now, it's almost as if they are sort of buried down underground, waiting for someone who wants to venerate them, someone who wants to get to know them. And talk about that. What is it like as an Orthodox Christian to be connecting to the saintly inheritance of your own country that in many ways is kind of lying buried somewhere?
What a wonderful way to put it, Father, yes. And of course, the fact that our saints belong to the period before the schism, they're mainly 6th and 7th century saints. The fact that they're Orthodox saints was, of course, one of the factors that brought me to Orthodoxy, really, definitely. And so, well, what's interesting is that, as I say, this is a new town, like 200 years old. And whereas most of the settlements in Wales are much older than that, and many, maybe one can say even the majority of them, bear the names of these saints. So you'll have come across this prefix llan, which means church, and there are many llans, llanna is the plural in Welsh, throughout the whole of Wales. People will have heard of some of them, Llandudno, Llanelli, and many hundreds of others. And the second part of the name is usually the name of a saint, and usually the saint who founded that community.
That's amazing. So almost every one of these towns that has this Llan beginning, which is spelled Llan,
indeed,
not obvious to non-Welsh speakers, there was a saint that was at that place.
Yes, indeed. And interestingly, you mentioned Llan, and you pronounced it very well, by the way. Apparently, this sound L exists in one of the Aleutian languages.
Oh, interesting.
So, Saint Innocenti will have come across that sound. So, Llan, yes. So, let's take, for example, Llandecwyn, which is not here, far from here. This town geographically is surrounded by a number of historical medieval parishes, each of which bears the name of a saint. So the saints of this region are St. Tecwyn, Twrog, Wyddelam, Brothen, Tidglyd, Cledwyn, Madryn, and Anhyn. You can do a circle like that. And each settlement bears the name of a saint. So let's say Llandecwyn, which is a small village. So St. Tecwyn was, I think, one of the sons of Helig ap Blaenau from Brittany. And he and his brothers settled along this coast. So he settled there as a monk. And as in the case of St. David in South Wales, who was a well-known saint, the patron saint of Wales. And as in the case of Saint Sergei of Radonej, people were attracted by the holiness of his life. So a monastic community was founded, and then a larger community, families and so on. And so these settlements came into being, bearing the name of the saint to whom they owe their existence. And so I remember once contributing to an article which said, well, Wales, the geography of Wales is created by saints, because so many of these places are named after them. And yes, to get back to your point, here they are, not having been prayed to for centuries during the Reformed period.
Right.
And I believe yearning to be involved in our lives, in the lives of Orthodox Christians, and in the lives of other people too, to draw them to Orthodox Christianity. So we have this wonderful heritage, which we are privileged to be encompassed by. And of course, we've started by having icons of Welsh saints painted. And there are quite a few iconographers now who do paint icons of local British saints, including Welsh saints. And what we did here, we started by basing icons on the very few depictions of these early saints that have survived the Protestant Reformation. Because when Henry VIII destroyed the monasteries and instituted the Church of England, he removed altars. I think no altars survived from that period, because the altar, of course, was connected to the Mass, and they'd rejected the theology of the Eucharist, and the format was understood in the Middle Ages. And so the altars were destroyed, and also depictions of saints and relics of saints.
Yeah.
So very few relics are known to survive. But of course, we can never know whether some may have been buried and whether they will come to light in the future. Let's hope that they do.
I remember yesterday on our pilgrimage, we visited the shrine of Saint Melangell. And one of the things that struck me was it was a very unostentatious place, a small church, very remote, long, windy road to get there. And but you said that the saints of Wales yearn to be connected to those who are alive now. And when we went there, there was a very strong presence of the saint, even though, again, it was not this sort of ornate kind of church, but a strong presence. And then as we were leaving, all of us felt this reluctance to leave.
Yes.
And it was almost as if she was saying, leaving so soon. You've just stopped by. And I wonder if you could talk about what it's like to have this very hyper-local connection to saints. And then maybe you could talk a little bit about Saint Melangell, because you said, for instance, that a number of saints' relics were many were destroyed in the Reformation here in the UK, but some were buried, some were saved somewhere. Could you talk about that?
Yes, well, the first point about the saints yearning to be in touch. Well, this is a theological assumption I make, and also comes from an intuition and a feeling. Of course, because we're a family of faith, we as Orthodox Christians living on earth, we love to be in touch with Orthodox Christians in heaven, the saints, and so it has to be a two-way process. Part of the church, and what it must be like for them to have been neglected, suddenly exiled from the lives of people for 400 years. But of course, not completely exiled, because people continued to go to the holy wells. But course, the understanding of what a holy well is was gradually lost. The devotion to the saint was lost, but people would continue to go to these holy wells and continue to do so now. But anyway, the links became more and more tenuous. So we don't know how many relics were not destroyed. We don't know if some were hidden. I recently learned that in a church in a bit further east in North Wales, Llanelli, that maybe during the last century, that some work was being in another church, and some bones were found in the plaster. I don't know what that could be, other than the saints' relics having been hidden, and I don't know what was done when they were found. It's quite, it's quite a long time ago. One should maybe search for articles in the local press relating to it, but that was a very interesting case. In the case of Saint Melangell, the relics were retrieved from the chapel of the grave, that area behind the restored shrine, and they were reinstated in the reconstructed shrine. So the shrine had been vandalized, been destroyed, and the stones from it used by local farmers in their walls, but in many cases easily identifiable. And so, as you saw, the shrine was reconstructed, and many of the stones of the original shrine used, and where they were not available, they were replaced deliberately by concrete, so that people would know what were the original stones and what is not the part of the original shrine. And so, yes, it's there in a very remote valley, and it was a site of pilgrimage. Saint Melangell was an Irish princess who fled from Ireland to escape an arranged marriage, found this very remote valley, lived there as a hermitess. And shall I continue the story? Or?
Please.
Yeah, okay. And one day the local prince, Brochwel Ysgythrog, was hunting with his hunting men, and suddenly the hounds began to wail, and the horses froze, so to speak, and he realized that something extraordinary, if not supernatural, was happening. And there they saw the hare which they were chasing hide under the garments of a lady. She was the hermitess Melangell. And he realized what was happening, and he realized she was a saint. And what he did then, he gave that territory to her, and she founded a monastery, a convent of nuns. And when the church was restored in the last few decades, archaeological work was done, and they found the graves of nuns, and they found with each nun a number of white pebbles. And apparently it was a custom in Ireland, the country of origin of Saint Melangell, to bury nuns with as many white stones as the years they had lived as nuns. So this confirmed the Irish connection, and of course they were reinterred, and the church was restored very sensitively. It has the medieval rood screen, which quite a few churches do, although the rood, the cross, was taken down by Thomas Cromwell, the agent of Henry VIII. And that brings us back to an earlier point you made about the icons here, and about some of them being based on surviving depictions. So there are a few surviving depictions. So one of them is a depiction of Saint Cadwaladr.
Yes, his icon is right here next to us.
His icon is there, and that is based on a stained glass window in Cadwaladr on Anglesey. And that stained glass window was not touched by the reformers. And apparently the reason that Cromwell did not destroy certain depictions, was if they were royalty.
Yes, I can see he's seated on a throne, he's wearing a crown, he's got an orb and a scepter in his hand, so he's a king.
He's a king.
I know nothing about it, so...
Yes. Well, so the icon survived, the glass window survived, because he was a king, not because he was a saint. Ironically. Well, that's what Cromwell thought anyway.
Right.
I think we know more than that.
Yeah.
He, Saint Cadwaladr, was the last king of the Britons, dying in the year 682. It was a time of great turmoil, invasions, geopolitical changes, and as a result, many people were displaced. He was the grandson of Saint Cadwan, who was a holy man, and the son of Saint Cadwallon. His father was a warrior rather than a saint. But he, Saint Cadwaladr, inherited the crown at this very challenging time. It was almost a poison chalice, one can say. And he just helped these people who were living in crisis. He gave his possessions to them, he cared for them, he was humble, and the icons of him show this. He behaved almost like a fool for Christ, one can say. But anyway, the point is that as the last king of the Britons, his death marks the beginning of the history of Wales. According to the monks of Strata Florida Abbey, who wrote the history of Wales, Bryd y Tywysogion, the Chronicles of the Princes, the first entry is the death of Saint Cadwaladr. It's only thereafter that we speak of Wales, Cymru in Welsh, Wales. Before then, we just speak of the Britons. But from the year 682, we speak. And so he's one of the foundational saints of Wales. The two others are Saint Aristobulus, who apostle to Great Britain, a fact confirmed in Orthodox liturgical texts, and St. David, the patron saint of Wales. So these are the foundational saints of Wales. St. Cadwaladr, whose death marks the beginning of our history as Welsh people, St. David and St. Aristobulus. Then there were other depictions of saints that had survived. St. Pablo, for example, St. Pablo, the post-Prydain, St. Pablo, the pillar of Britain, his icon is there. He was from what we call the Old North. So we have North Wales, but we have the Old North, and this name, this term, is used amongst Welsh people to this day, the Old North. It means north, Northumbria as far as Scotland, Edinburgh, Caer, Edin, Glasgow, Glasgoed, Catraeth, Catterick. The first Welsh poetry from the 5th century is written there. Not in territory of Wales, but in the Old North. So St. Pablo was a king from the Old North, and he had a dynasty of descendants, of whom several were saints. St. Deiniol, my own patron saint, who was the first bishop of Bangor, St. Deiniol. Family of saints. So there was another depiction. Now, this depiction was on a tombstone in Anglesey. And presumably, the local people, when the Reformation came, maybe they buried this tombstone. And also the depiction of Saint Iestyn, who was a monk, also in Anglesey, that was also preserved. So we have icons here based on those two tombstones. So those are three surviving depictions. So we started like that, with icons of Welsh saints, and then others we based them on the narratives of their lives.
Right. I see St. Melangell right in front of me. You can't see it, but right in front of me, she's there praying, actually very much in a posture like icons of St. Seraphim of Saros.
Very much, yes.
And then down at her knees is the hair.
Is the hair, yes. And you see, it was very interesting. What has survived in that area is that people, I don't know, even in modern times, they say, "Do a Melangell gydathi, God and Melangell be with you." She's seen as the protector of hares and of animals. So that touches people's hearts, I think. Do a Melangell gydathi, God and Melangell be with you.
So tell me about some of the other. It seems to me that the number of Welsh saints is almost impossible to. I can't keep track. There's so many.
Yes, we're talking about hundreds, and they're in the calendar. And,
hundreds.
And some days have many saints. And of course, because of the reasons I mentioned before, there is no area of Wales that does not have a local saint. I can't think that there would be any area.
Amazing. In America, most of us have to travel hundreds, if not thousands of miles.
Yes.
To reach a place where an Orthodox saint went. Those of us who live in the Northeast, there's areas there that it's more more common.
Yes.
But it's just astonishing to be traveling around this country and have a sense that every place is a holy place.
Yes, well, in spite of what you say, you do it. You travel to these holy places connected with St. Herman and St. Raphael of Brooklyn.
Right. He's our Pennsylvanian saint.
Well, that's right. A wonderful saint. And but you do it. And of course, well, I hope as the Orthodox population of Wales and beyond increases, that we will find the same happening. In fact, it is happening. Pilgrimage from Orthodox parishes is happening. My colleague in northwest of England, for example, he regularly comes. He's coming actually the end of this week to Penwan in Anglesey, where Saint Ceiriol lived, and Saint Cubby and Saint Ceiriol, two saints connected with Anglesey. We used to meet in the centre of Anglesey for prayer and spiritual discussion. So pilgrimages are happening, and I think they will happen increasingly. And miracles are happening. People get healed, and yes, this is why I feel the saints are waiting for us to acknowledge them, to have their icons painted, for prayers and services to be held in their churches. I believe, yes, they're there and waiting, I believe.
So you mentioned, parish pilgrimages happening from people in the UK, from parishes in the UK. Are there a lot of individual pilgrims who are coming in small groups, or even people like me, travelers from other countries that are coming to visit the saints?
Yes, there are, Father. Several people have contacted me recently. There's somebody coming tomorrow, somebody else at the weekend. Several people. Sometimes they're interested in an icon. One person left a message. They want to see the icon of Saint Cubby. Somebody's doing some research, doctoral research, and they want to see the icon of Saint Cubby. Somebody else has been brought up knowing the names of the saints but knowing nothing about them, and wants to find out more. A lady brought up in Anglesey. I haven't met either of those people yet. So yes, we get individuals, we get groups, we get also pilgrimages from local Reformed tradition churches.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, indeed, very interesting. So, for example, a few years ago, a particular region, the churches of that region closed on that Sunday and travelled over 100 miles by bus to attend our Divine Liturgy instead of having their own church services.
Remarkable.
Yes, these were Congregationalists and Methodists, and they decided, right, and the same thing has happened from a local church here in North Wales. They'll come here. I think they came on a Sunday morning too. So that happens, and that's very interesting and unexpected, one might say.
How would you say that the local people of Wales, when they encounter Orthodox Christianity, what is their reaction? What is their understanding?
Well, there'll be many different responses, of course. So we start off at quite a good point, really. For example, in Cardiff, the Greek community is very well integrated into Cardiff international life. It's one of the earliest communities. They have a wonderful church, excellent priest, a big community, maybe 3,000 people in the area they serve. They've been there for generations. Their names are known, the family's names are known, they're in business and so on. And so that's a very positive factor. Then perhaps it's been, it's good that the first two Orthodox, Welsh-speaking Welsh Orthodox priests, Father Barnabas and myself, are native Welsh speakers. And so we over the years have been able to do interviews, on radio and TV, and we've been invited to give talks in places in Welsh language, in churches and chapels and whatever. So we start off like that, and I don't think the people who have some awareness think of us as very foreign. I'm not sure that the Roman Catholic Church has managed to root itself quite in Welsh communities over the centuries since the Reformation. we're very blessed in that way. But of course, there'll be people who have no idea what the Orthodox Church is. So then they're inviting me to say who we are and what our history is, and others who may be interested in the saints. So there'll be a variety of responses.
Right.
So,
you mentioned that people still make pilgrimages to the holy wells. And yesterday we visited St. Winifred's Well, a beautiful, grand structure, really. And we're able to anoint ourselves with some of the water from the well. And you also mentioned in one of our conversations yesterday that there's somewhere around 300 holy wells in Wales.
I think 300 documented ones, yes.
Right. So explain that to me. What is the place of the holy well in Welsh Christian history?
Yes, it seems to be a phenomenon, doesn't it? So these two things seem quite closely connected. The fact that a place is named after its local saint, and then something pertaining to the saint. So not far away from here is the community of Deiniol. There's an icon part of the church down here of St. Deiniol. She was traveling along the mountains, had a skin disease, bathed in the water, was healed, and became a well to which people had recourse if they had skin diseases, and then the community developed. And so, so there's the saint, the church and the community named after the saint, and that linked to the saint's life. So there'll be different ways in which the holy well is related to the life of a saint. So in the case of St. Deiniol, she received healing at that well. In other cases, maybe a saint was baptized at a well, like St. David was. Different events in lives of saints are connected with the well. And so this link has been preserved. We are so blessed here in Wales to have these two links, the names of the places and the names of the wells. You know, in the Soviet Union, the names of lots of places were changed,
right?
Specifically because they were religious. Sergei Pappas became Zagorsk, for example, and many other towns and cities were given other names. They've been changed back now in many cases. Well, the Protestant reformers could not have done this in Wales. They could never have found enough names to rename almost every place. Nobody would know where the places were.
It's too pervasive. The names are all Christian, it seems.
Yes. So, you know, one longs for the day when people will be wanting to make this connection with their saint, and will be realizing that the Orthodox Church is the church that can help us do this.
Right.
And for them to be praying for that saint, to be helping them in their daily lives, on their farms or in their industry or whatever. Some of the places are rural, some are industrial. Llanelli is a big industrial centre. Other places are rural centres.
The pervasiveness of the connection of local saints to places here in Wales almost gives one the impression that you could simply come to the country and then visit any series of towns, and you would be hitting pilgrimage sites.
Well,
almost everywhere you go.
You can't. If we leave, we're going to leave here today later. We can't get out of Blaenau Ffestiniog without passing through a territory named after a saint. Whichever direction we go in, we'll be going to one of these medieval parishes named after one of the saints. So.
Amazing. So I have one last question. This might seem like it's a departure from the rest, but it's something that at least is on my mind, and I imagine maybe a lot of Americans that might come to Wales. The dragon is, of course, prominent on the Welsh flag. And there's a lot of dragon motifs in imagery all over the country. What is the place of the dragon in Welsh culture and mythology? What is up with that?
Yes, I should have expected this question, really, shouldn't I?
I have an interest in dragons.
Yes, I know.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Metropolitan Anthony used to actually call me Dragon. Dragon, come here.
Interesting.
Yeah, I hope it was because I'm Welsh. Anyway, so there's legendary, isn't there? There's a legendary fight between two dragons, and the red one, the Welsh one, wins. So there's that. I think yes. I think that's the significance. So it becomes a sort of emblem of identity.
Yeah,
and a very sort of live one too, really.
Right. Well, and in Christianity, there are two kinds of dragons. I mean, there's seraphim, which guard the throne of God and serve as people, and then you've got the fallen, angels, that function in this draconic way as well. So I think the myth works very well.
I think so, and I look forward to to encountering your observations when you had a further opportunity to look into the Welsh dragon.
Indeed. Well, Father Deiniol, thank you so much for speaking with me today and for sharing part of your life and your ministry here in your homeland and some of the saints. And I cannot recommend enough, folks, come here, come visit these places and see for yourself exactly what it is we're talking about. Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father. Yes, I reiterate the invitation, and our bishop is very keen to promote pilgrimage, and our church down the road is All Saints of Wales. All Saints of Wales. And welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.